Oh, hey, buddy, it's your old pal Scott. This is Let's Talk Tabletop. This is where we talk about the tabletop. And today I wanted to discuss an idea that's been bandied about the internet over the years, and it usually comes up with a pretty good conversation, pro or against. And that is, should Games Workshop provide pre painted miniatures for their games? I have opinions, so let's dive in. Of course, there is a history of miniatures games being pre-painted. Okay, not everything's Games Workshop or Mantic or Malifaux or anything like that. We've got HeroClix, we've got Star Wars Armada, we've got X-Wing, we've got multiple games that have somehow pulled it off. So we know that it is economically viable in some fashion, and we also know it's completely possible. What the cost is of that, we don't entirely know, but we do know it is possible. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. The idea of making pre-painted miniatures would be that it would entice new people to join the hobby that may not be interested in the hobby side of it. They don't have the budget for having someone pro-paint their miniatures or something like that. And they may have always been turned off by the hobby aspect of it, but they still would like to play. And Games Workshop definitely wants to sell them miniatures, right? I think we all know the answer to that. So it's such an interesting, complex problem, though, because if you want to produce miniatures for starter kits for people, essentially, right, for new people, it's obviously going to cost more. If the models are assembled like HeroClix and the models are painted like HeroClix, it's obviously going to be more expensive for them than just making the sprue and shipping it to you, right? You got to do all the work yourself. It's obviously more expensive. But then the catch-22 to that is if you're paying, let's say, $60 for 10 Orc Boys, and they want to sell you 10 pre-painted Orc Boys, they're not going to sell it to you for $60. They're going to sell it to you for 120 or something, which of course is completely counter to what you'd want to do to entice new people to join the hobby, right? If they don't have the money for the pro-painted stuff, they're not going to have the money for double the cost or whatever it would be. Especially being that we know the Games Workshop likes premium prices on things. And so that's right there your first hurdle. How would you possibly make pre-painted miniatures that were affordable for a new person? There's another issue here is that are you going to pre-paint and pre-assemble all of the line, like the entire Warhammer line? I think all of us could pretty much agree that that's out of the question. They're just not going to do that because all of their molds are for sprues. Their molds aren't for, individual people. Like HeroClix oftentimes, if you really like dig into a HeroClix, it's like 3 parts or something like that. It's mostly like maybe this arm and the torso and leg are, molded together, and like this head and this arm is molded together and they plug in, and like there's like a cape. That's the third piece. It plugs in. They glue it together in the factory. But there's no way that even if Games Workshop decided to go the pre-painted route, that they would actually do that for their entire line because, well, multiple reasons, but the sheer magnitude of doing that would be insane. And really, if you're talking about just trying to entice people into the hobby, you really don't need to have every single unit either. Like, that's not really necessary, I don't think, at all. So, what I would propose is if they were going to do that, is just pick one troop choice and like one character, make it like a special box of like a Space Marine captain and an intercessor squad, and have them pre-painted and all of that, and that's all they have pre-painted. Make a a Tyranid Tyranid Prime and some Tyranid warriors, or a war boss and some knobs, or whatever, just like a small like combat patrol. And you could probably charge $100 for that if it was pre-painted and everything. And I mean, it's not a great deal, but if you want your stuff pre-painted, that would be the thing you do, so that they could get the bulk of their army painted. And then once they're into it, okay, well, I bought 5 of these pre-painted boxes. I got 50 boys and 5 war bosses, which seems excessive. But anyway, that's what they should do if they're going to do it. So it's just a foot in, a toe in, and then it goes further than that afterwards. Then the people are invested, they want to paint the stuff, whatever. Um, but that's got its flaws too, because if they bought into something because it was pre-painted, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to want to paint once they're invested, right? And a lot of people would probably just see through this whole charade anyway, where they'd go, "Oh, well, okay, the beginning of the army's pre-painted, but the rest of it's not, so I'm just not going to paint." So I'm not entirely sure it would actually draw in new people either. The other take on this, instead of trying to draw in new people, is that Games Workshop could just select a few units of every army and make it pre-painted for the existing fan base. You know, the things that you see the most, like troops and whatnot. And that might actually work because not everybody wants to have some crazy color scheme. Not everybody wants to take the time to paint it. Not everybody wants a blue orc instead of a green orc. Most people want green orcs. It makes sense, right? Most people want metallic Necrons. It makes sense. You could even pick one chapter of Space Marines and we only paint Ultramarines. That's it. So those are pre-painted. And that kind of makes sense, I guess. But I would be very, very interested to see the actual price point of what Games Workshop would put on something like this. I think maybe they would like team up with WizKids or something like that, or something that nobody ever wants to hear. Games Workshop will probably, as far as corporations go, Games Workshop very well one day may be sold to another gaming company like NECA or Wizards of the Coast or something like that. NECA owns HeroClix and several other, and NECA has bought up many IPs to many different things. I believe they're the ones that also bought up HeroClix. They didn't create it; they bought it up. So then, if let's say NECA bought Games Workshop, that's when you might get the crossover because then they would already have the industry, they'd have the things in place that they already make HeroClix, so it wouldn't be a huge deal, and they could figure that out. So that would be the only viable way I could see them doing this, is that they obviously sell it for a premium and probably just some core units of every army, and then also if they got bought out or made some sort of deal with some other company that already does that thing. Because, you know, Games Workshop does a lot of things in-house. That's one of the things they're known for. And to contract this out with another company is not quite their style, especially when it comes to their direct product line like miniatures. Another problem with the pre-painted miniatures is that obviously Games Workshop sells paint. They sell brushes, they sell hobby supplies. Well, anyone that you sell a pre-painted miniature to is not going to necessarily buy the paint and the brushes and all of that. So how much would they lose compared to how much they gain? I think they'd lose more than they'd gain from that because, I mean, at the rate that my Citadel paints dry out, I mean, they're getting tons of money from me to begin with. Every other month, I'm rebuying the same paint. And so that right there, just their crappy paint bottles is making them a fortune. So I really don't see it. If you want my take on it, I really don't foresee it ever happening. I could foresee possibly them doing not pre-painted, but they have in the past done starter sets with like blue Space Marines. I think it was 8th edition. Yeah, it was 8th edition was the Plague Marines versus the Space Marines. And the Plague Marines were like a green and the Space Marines were blue. I've seen them do that before. That works okay. So I could definitely see them doing that. And if they just started doing all of their armies that way, Space Marines are always blue plastic. That's it. And that actually could work. I think that would probably be the most cost efficient. But then it's not really an answer to the problem, because the problem was that you want to entice people to play your game and don't have to paint their models, but then you're still gonna have to paint them. I mean, when you look at those colored plastics, especially dark colors like blue, sometimes it's hard to tell what the unit is because you're just like, what is it? There's no definition at all. Everything's the same color. I don't know. I just don't foresee this happening, like, ever. The only concession would be if they team up with someone, or maybe they make colored plastics. Maybe. A metallic colored plastic for Necrons, that would work. So, although the hassle for that would be so much that I don't see what they're getting out of it. Right now, they have the best case scenario. They barely make the miniatures and they ship them to you. And you pay a premium and then you do all of the work. If you follow anything like the action figure industry or things like that, every single time that something has to be touched by a human on the assembly line, obviously increases cost, right? Even if you're doing something to in another country that has lower wages or whatever, like China or India, that it still adds to the cost. So for them to have these things already assembled like HeroClix and then painted like HeroClix, even if it's very automated, I just don't see them doing it. So it's a neat idea on paper, and I've heard many people argue one way or the other way or whatever, but I just don't see it making any business sense. So, unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to see it. And to be honest, I think they've stopped doing the colored plastic. The last time that I know I saw colored plastic was the 8th edition starter set. They also did like a Speed Freaks Orcs box or something like that, and they had like some of them were red plastic, some of them were yellow plastic for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. I don't remember like if it was part of a game or something, but anyway, I just don't foresee it happening. They have the best case scenario here. They charge you through the nose and you do all the work. Why would they take on more labor if they can't charge you way more? And to be honest, I think a lot of us agree that they are up to their limit with how much they can charge us anyway, and people are kind of like jumping off the old boat there. But you know what? Hey, you see this Brutality Skirmish War game? Mass Brutality, Brutal Space, and Brutal Epic are all games that I created. It's anti power creep. It is anti money grabbing. I don't disqualify your purchases, and you can stat out your units any way you want using the rules. So if you want skirmish games, space games, mass battle games, check out brutalityskirmishwargame.com. I'd appreciate it. Anyway, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Thank you for liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting. And thank you to all my beautiful, sexy, good-smelling Patreon patrons. You look at them. Look at that. It's gorgeous. These people are salt of the earth, especially Pestilence. Pestilence is an awesome, awesome person. So, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Do you think Games Workshop will ever do this? I don't think so.